On this episode from the Ed of Ed, I'm working on the Burroughs Adding and Listening Machine. This is episode 4. Basically, mechanically everything's done. The felt has been cleaned on the keyboard surface, and now we're down to basically cleaning the outer case, which has not really been seen since the first bit of the first episode where it was removed and put off to one side. A lot of cleaning issues to go on with that, and then general cleaning issues of the rest of the machinery. Put the guy back together, and that'll probably be it, other than maybe some other little minor how-tos or something like that with this machine. But it's getting pretty close to being finished. So now it's time to start thinking about cleaning this case. And, you know, it's in pretty good shape, other than it looks like, I don't know, people... looks like they spray painted nearby this machine. I think this is paint. And if you look at the keys on the keyboard on this guy, there's little speckles of different colored paint. So I suspect that this guy was somewhere near something that people were spray painting at some point. It looks like it was on one side versus the other. It's an interesting design. This thing's all cast iron, with the exception of this little piece of sheet metal that's rolled in place and held in with some clips. And then you can see the bottom side of the push buttons, and they're worked with little springs that engage on little tabs on the stationary side in the machine itself. There's some clips here for a little table that would fold down for your documents to sit here. And of course this is the side where the hand crank went. That's pretty much it. Otherwise it appears to be cast iron and maybe steel. And the glass is held in with clips, and then there's some sort of a compound putty that kind of, you know, softly held it in place. So the first thing I might try naively is maybe just some window cleaner and see if that might actually clean this, but I'm quite certain that that's not going to attack that for a minute. So it's probably going to have to be some sort of solvent that will go after this paint. So I think I will work on that, see what I might be able to come up with. Okay, so I used acetone and I got the worst of the paint off. Interesting, there was yellow, black, white, and green colors, and unfortunately there were some bigger blobs on the paint itself, on the lacquered, probably black lacquered paint of the frame, and with a cloth being nearly dry of acetone, I took a gamble and got those chunks to come off. They weren't adhered very well, so that's why they came off. The screen printing is on the inside, so luckily cleaning this side is not a problem. And hopefully the insides are pretty clean still. And that side, it looks a lot better. So that's acetone. So the next thing I'll do is I'll probably do some alcohol to get off what might be soluble with alcohol. And then probably your classic window cleaners, and then from there I've got to figure out what I'm going to do with these guys. There's still paint splatters on here, they're very small, but I can't use any sort of a real aggressive solvent on this lacquer. It's probably a low, or I should say high volatile lacquer. You know, when you manufactured stuff back then, you wanted paint that dried quickly, basically, so you had something that had a lot of volatiles in it. It would those volatiles evaporate. As a result, this probably black lacquer is pretty sensitive to any sort of really aggressive cleaning agents, you know, or especially acetone and probably alcohol. So I'm still debating how to clean this, and I'm just going to brush off all this dust so I don't scratch it up. Okay, so I've done my initial cleaning of all the windows with acetone, alcohol. There's this spray glass stuff that was given to me. I don't know if it's any good. Well, it's good. It doesn't seem to bother anything. And then, of course, the classic ammonia stuff. And I think the biggest thing is to you put the minimum out kind of in the center. You rip little pieces of paper towel as small as you can, and you fold it in about 4 places. Then you can rub until this guy's nasty. You know, fold it over to the next clean surface. And you still got most of the solvent in there that you can continue reusing. So you use a minimum amount of solvent, and you don't keep smearing dirt and crud around. And you keep getting this surface cleaned, and then you do the next surface, and then you fold over pretty much the next surface. working from the inside to the out, and then trying to be bare minimum getting these edges, which is kind of a challenge because there's this kind of a tar glazing compound that's in there that you can definitely see it kind of squeezed out, and it wants to come out from time to time itself and streak everywhere. And then you don't want to be damaging this probably high volatile lacquer paint here. Most solvents will probably be a little too much for it. And that kind of brings up the next thing as to what to do about that. So the thought is, you got all this dirt and paint on here, so you want to brush that stuff off as much as you can and get it out of there before you start rubbing on this thing with a cloth, because otherwise this dust is going to act as an abrasive. So the next thing, and you might consider wearing a mask, God knows what this is. It's interesting that the different paints that were on there, it looks like there was also a clear coat, and it's mostly on the glass. It seems to adhere to the glass quite well. It doesn't look like it adhered as much to the paint, the low volatile lacquer. I'm assuming that's what this is. So do a lot of dusting here, and then I'll get on with the cleaning, or further cleaning. So with as much of the dust as I've been able to convince to come off, the next thing I'm going to try is something I kind of learned from the sewing machine restoration folks. They seem to like to use, oddly enough, sewing machine oil to clean their sewing machines that are also probably a high volatile lacquer coating. And they always get sewing machine oil all over these things anyways when they're lubricating the things all the time. So I bought some sewing machine oil, and I'm going to try and see if I can use a sewing machine oil to just put a few drops here and there and on the cloth, and see if I can convince, the worst of the dirt to then come off with the least amount of scratching and the least amount of damage to this fairly delicate paint. And it certainly does look like it puts a nice, kind of rejuvenates the paint, it looks like, and it doesn't look like it's damaging it. So it looks kind of promising, so I might pursue this. There's some odd material on that surface, it looks like. That really does seem to be. And then the idea is, once you got all the dirt off, you wipe off the excess oil, and it kind of brings up, it kind of rejuvenates the paint, which, you probably like the stuff. It certainly looks like it's pretty happy with it. So we'll go with this. I also have another what are they called? Not stencil, application of whatever these labels are called. I can't remember what they're called at the moment. So it's pretty delicate, so I'm going to go on that pretty lightly. And it's another thing with this stuff is it hopefully won't remove that these guys. Sometimes I'm one for words here. Looks like it's working pretty nice. And the corners and edges is a challenge, and of course between the keys. The other thing is, of course, once again, once your cloth gets dirty, swap it out for another one, because you're just going to start scratching it with all that dirt. Well, this one's about done, and I'll have to switch over to another. I guess by happenstantial accident, I'll have oiled these buttons a little bit, their motion process. But I think it's looking pretty good, so I'll come back later with this hopefully looking pretty nice. I'd say overall, the idea of sewing machine oil is a winner here. I like it. I gotta wipe off the excess still a little bit. I've been kind of going back and forth, putting a few drops, folded cloth. If you're a little more concerned about scratching, obviously cotton wads would be nice. And then wipe on off the excess, and then kind of going back at it again. And the decal, be a little extra special, careful, and maybe use a cloth there and be more gentle in that area. And it's working pretty good. The big problem here is this rather putting off area here. I can't seem to figure out what this material is here. It may have, I don't know what it is. It seems like it's slowly responding to the sewing machine oil, but I might eventually have to try and take a little bit of a gamble and clean it off a little bit more. It just makes it look so right in that one spot. I don't know if you can see it too well, but I don't know if it shows up on the camera, but in person, I'll tell you, it just looks like some nasty snot material. I just wouldn't want to touch it, but it sure is dried on there really good. So I'll keep working on that. Overall, I'd say that came out pretty good. The sewing machine oil has cleaned it pretty darn nice and hasn't damaged the paint. And in fact, it's probably given it a little extra preservation with a little drink of oil it really needed. The big thing is probably paper towels. Hold it up until you get the worst of it off. Keep wiping, adding more oil, wiping. And at the end there, cotton cloths to start to do the finishing touches, get the last of the crud and oil off. When you see the towel or the cotton swab have very little on it, you're pretty much there. I mean, you can get to the point where I guess it's completely white, but it leaves a nice polish to it. It tends to give it this shiniest look. If you see a spot that still has some dullness, it's probably crud there, and you'll probably notice it on the rag or the cotton swab. And just keep going back at it and at it. It's a slow process. It's not as fast as, say, some other solvents are, but it's not much less likely to damage the paint. It's probably going to preserve it, and it takes off stubborn stuff that I hadn't thought would come off, like all these spray paints that were sprayed on this thing. I even put some on these key buttons. It didn't seem to clean up. They're definitely cleaner than they were before. They didn't do quite as much of a miracle there. It seems like the paint's more readily adhered to the keys. But once again, it probably is helping to preserve this material, which is probably I'm guessing a Bakelite, and that's kind of an oil-based material anyway, so it probably would help keep these buttons from maybe drying out and cracking quite so much. So I think that's pretty good. I'll clean up the inside a little bit more where I kind of smeared it with my oily gloves, and then when I put it back in the machine, I'll do the final cleaning on the glass. The big thing to think about is when you have decals and screen printing, be very gentle on those areas. I basically again just the lightest little touches with the driest, near dry cloth after everything else has been rubbed. And it's still a little cruddy and smeary probably in around these letters, but it's worth being more gentle and careful with that. You can always go back and do something more, but if you do too much and you destroy it, then that's it. And these things are kind of delicate, especially on glass. It's probably not a very good adhesion. So the next thing is the machine itself, and then we can put this guy on. Okay, so with the felt cleaned is about as good as I can get. Keys cleaned somewhat carefully with mostly just soap and water, very lightly with a toothbrush and Q-tips and so forth. The big thing is the paint fill on the keys can pop out really easy, and it's done so in a few spots. So I'm having to leave a bit more paint and crud than I would really like. I'll have to come back and think about what I might want to do on the keys. But the felt looks so much more appealing. And now it's more of a case of look at cleaning what I can, once again with this sewing machine oil. And bought this, I believe, at Joann's Fabric for $7. I went to Ace Hardware and they had the same stuff. And he called it high-speed machinery oil, basically, and it works for sewing machines. And I think that was, yeah, $5. It has a nice telescoping spout here. I'm not sure how well it would work for adding machines and calculators. It might work great for oiling that too, so I might give it a try. But as a cleaning agent and a preservation of the high volatile lacquer, it seems to be doing great. So I'm going to see how much of this crud I can get off. And then the last thing would be, things like nickel plating, if I ever really want to try nickel plating. And then put the cover back on, do a little bit of spot cleaning inside and maybe some spot oiling, and I think this project will be pretty nice, other than surface rust in spots, especially on the outside where it wasn't protected. You can see some of the connecting rods that connect some of these parts together. They seem to be not made out as nice a metal as compared to all these plates here, which I think these might be CAD plated. They did CAD plating a lot back in the day, so that might be why they look so nice compared to, say, some of the rods that are underneath especially under the carriage. There's a whole bunch of little fine rods, and either they're not as good as steel, or I'm not sure. Anyhow, looks pretty nice, getting nicer by the minute. Okay, a few pointers on the back side here. I've been using some sort of spray lubricant cleaner. The nice thing about the stuff is it foams up, and it gets into these nooks and crannies nicely, and then you can just kind of go back and wipe the excess out and get a lot of the dirt that you can at least get at on various surfaces out. And the big thing is, get the excess oil out along with all the dirt that you're liberating. The backside of these machines, were pretty heavily lubricated from the looks of it, and they're heavy devices. They aren't small, delicate little components like you would see in an adding machine. So this heavier oil, I don't think is a big deal. And I got the arm control tabs the tab stop mechanism here, and the control arm bars out. I'll show how they go in and out in a bit. And the spray cleaner helps on that. You give them a good dose and then let that stuff soak for a while, and then you can start wiping off some of the excess that liberates off. It's not as good as maybe a parts cleaning tank or something like that, but it's slowly attacking this stuff and getting it off. And I guess you could use acetone or something like that too, or alcohol to get some of that stuff off. Although I think the big takeaway of it all is that, along with I was cleaning the case and everything else, is you start accumulating these rags, and every few minutes when you have a little pile of these things, you definitely want to put them in a metal fireproof container, because they are definitely a fire hazard. So kind of watch that. Big thing is, this backside I'll never get super duper clean, I suspect. I'll get it a lot better, and it'll be lubricated in the process. Jamming paper towels in there, wiping and cleaning as I move along here. Get the excess oil out after a few cycles, and I think it'll definitely be better than it was, and it'll be well preserved. It'll operate well, and when I go to store or display this thing, it'll probably be in a fairly dust-proof container, or display cabinet, or storage or something like that. So even though I do have this little film of oil, which it would have had originally, just for its practical daily use, it won't collect a lot of dust, basically. The big thing is just to clean all that excess oil off to the point where you just don't seem to be getting any residue off, and I think it's a pretty nice way of doing it. Well, quite a bit of fumbling later, I think I've kind of figured out how these guys go in. So I'll take them back out again and then put them back in again here. So that pipe pops out very nicely. These guys, let's see, first of all I have to get that guy out, pop that out, and then they come out. Okay, so not damaging anybody. There we go. So stop bar has to go in the bottom, like so. It literally guides itself in with those latches if you get it all lined right, and then that pops in this slot. I believe that's in there. Nope, not quite there. Not quite there. Okay. Nope, not quite there. Okay. This lever is independent of the other one. Okay, there we go. So you have to use this lever to get that pin in well, because with this bar links. This bar will link this lever on this side to this side, so it's independent. Okay, so that's interesting to know. And then this guy here, I'm trying to make certain it's in between some rollers. And there's a slot there for him to sit in, slot for them to sit in, and they go in. Once you kind of get the hang of it, it's pretty quick and easy. So I could see them doing that multiple times a day for all kinds of different process projects. So quite a bit of oil and cleaning processes later, I've got these guys, they move pretty freely. and cleaned. There is some mysterious bit of felt. Unfortunately, it's come undone. It's under both these sides. It helps kind of reduce vibration and everything. I'm gonna figure out how to glue those guys back in on this one side, and then lightly put some light oil on this guy, and then just wiped it real good with an old sock to keep the felt, keep the lint down. The rubber was just tearing up the paper towel quite a bit, and so I think a light oiling. Maybe I might figure out how to clean that off a little bit more. I'll have to see what it looks like with a actual piece of paper in it, but that looks quite a bit better. This guy had been damaged a little bit on the corners. You can see where the paint has been stressed a little bit from the flexing of the guy, but the slides now move around pretty nicely. It could be maybe a little cleaner, but it's kind of one of those things. It gets to be a big machine, and those last little details you start get tired of doing, and I can always go back and clean it some more. So I think the next thing to start thinking about is seeing about maybe cleaning the dials a little bit, and then put the case on. I've done some really light cleaning on the number wheels. The paint on them is really quite delicate, and if you rub too much, you can start to see the paint start to wash out of their little inscriptions. And so I think that's about as good as I'm going to get on these guys. They're going to have a little bit different coloration based on where they happen to be sitting last for the long time that it wasn't being used. But if I get too aggressive on this, I'll definitely tend to rub the paint right out. The paint is very soft and easily disturbed. So great care on cleaning the number wheels, because the paint really is delicate in there. And I used, once again, just a little bit of light sewing machine oil for that. It seemed to work. I kind of would think that any other cleaning solution would be worse, other than maybe just water. I maybe should have tried water first. I've used water on the keyboard buttons, and it's mildly effective on there, but once again, even that will pop the paint out, and it seems like the paint on this is proportionally quite a bit softer than I would have expected. So this might not even really be a paint. It might be more of a kind of like a paste material with a pigment in it that really isn't a paint that dries, because it seems very, very soft. So they may have applied this with kind of a paste pen of some sort and then wipe off the excess. So it may not actually be an oil-based paint in the traditional sense. Okay, so here's the big money shot. I got this guy about as cleaned as I can. A little bit of oiling. I could probably do a little bit more oiling, but it's I think looking pretty nice. Everything's running well. Felt is about as nice as it's going to get. The case is about as nice as you're going to get. And so it's time to put the case back on and have that little bit of lint and dust that now can be seen oh so easily through that glass, you know, be the cause of vexation rather than great huge amounts of yucky, disgusting stuff. So the big question is how to get this case back on, and that looks back on there. I do believe. Then I think it'll snap into that lock, I believe. Positioned right. So that nut appears to be in there. Something I can't seem to quite get right here. I think I probably have to get past the latch. Perhaps. There we go. Okay, had to hook the latch there. So I think a couple thumb nuts and we are basically done. I'll wipe off these thumb nuts. They're a little bit oily and dirty too. clean this guy off a bit. Now any streaks and dust on cleaning on the window, you know, it's going to seem crazily amplified because you can actually see into this thing now. Alright, so got that up. There we are. Got to do a little wipe down on the glass on the outside, of course, because I've kind of smeared it a bit. Hand crank goes in. You put it in kind of wiggle it in there. Wiggly. Only had to put it in once here, so. There we go. Okay, we're in. And we're in business. Well, there we are. I'm very pleased with that. That looks really nice. It's probably still not quite as clean as new as you might imagine, but that's not too bad. It's you know, the tarnish and so forth, and pitting of the nickel. Maybe someday I'll look into doing something more on that. But now you can see through that glass and see that you could clean the glass a little bit better or something like that, and not get all bothered about how gross and ugly it is and nasty it is and so forth. And that felt, you know, you can worry about the little bit of lint that's now collected on the felt from the cleaning and so forth, rather than the felt itself being absolutely gory and so forth. It is a really nice looking machine now, and it is, I'll still maybe experiment with the idea of putting a lighting system in it of some sort. I was thinking of putting it on the edges, and it doesn't look like there's enough room. I might try and light it from underneath. There's lots of room there, and I can just open up the cabinet from the back there and give it a try. So that's it. Probably 1919 Burroughs Class 1 adding machine with subtraction and a whole bunch of carriage control automation features. And this was definitely one of the more satisfying projects. Very visually appealing.